All right, dudes. Welcome. Hopefully, you guys are doing amazingly today, and also hopefully this fan is not too loud today, guys, because it is entirely too hot to sit here today without the fan. Let's get it, guys. We'll just wait for just a little bit. Generally about say 4 minutes, and we'll go ahead and get started. Let's get it, guys. Yes, please. Yes, without a doubt, please, as you're coming in, please like the stream. That helps a whole lot. People, it helps a whole lot. I appreciate you, Heidi. Let's make sure we have everything set up and ready to go. Oh no, I think I watched, I think I spoiled myself, bros. I think I watched like a good 2 seconds of it. I think things are going pretty well, I think. Pretty well today. Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and get it started in about 2 minutes, dudes. Let's just get a couple more people in here. It's looking like a car accident is going by. What happened? Is it a reaction request? Dude. Currently, this is a non-music. Yeah, a non-music reaction day. In a Star Spangled Banner, as he's never heard it. That actually sounds interesting, dude. Yeah, all the suggestions that you guys give generally, our project manager screenshots, and we end up getting to them. So just drop the suggestion here, dude. Yeah, Mr. Ballin is absolutely amazing, dude. Today we're doing Mr. Nightmare, though. Okay. All right, dudes. We are here. We're at the 5-minute mark, so let's go ahead and get this started, dudes. 3 scary true military stories being told by Mr. Nightmare. All right, let's jump into it. Hold on, verify we have the video up. Yeah, we do. All right, good job. Let's get it.
My dad served in the Vietnam War from 1960 to 1962. For the longest time, he didn't tell anyone outside of the family this story, but he's in his mid-80s now, and he doesn't care about me sharing it with anyone. Not that I intend to release any of our names. I've heard this story told by him 5 times now, and each time I learn about new details he hadn't mentioned the time before. He didn't like to tell this story for obvious reasons, I think.
Okay.
Not only is thinking back to any of those events probably traumatizing, but also he would always say,
Yeah, obviously. I mean, anyone who's gone through some form of like, a trauma or even extended trauma, would obviously not love to have their trauma brought up again, right? So.
not only is thinking back to any of those events probably traumatizing, but also he would always say he felt it would be an inappropriate family gathering discussion. My dad did a lot of things in the war. At one point he was what was known as a tunnel rat, which was a soldier who performed underground search and destroy missions, usually in underground tunnels. My dad and two of his comrades were crawling through a deep tunnel, expecting to hit a booby trap or run into an ambush, but the tunnels were surprisingly empty and silent. My dad describes the experience of crawling through the silent, dark tunnels as bone-chilling and adrenaline-pumping, as the fear of instant death at any moment would linger. My dad and his comrades heard a faint yelling and crying sound further down the tunnels. It was of a woman. As they crawled deeper into the tunnels, the cries and screams became more clear.
Okay. Nope.
And it was obvious there was a woman screaming
I'm not doing
for help.
it, bro.
The three picked up their pace, worried of a potential hostage or prisoner situation. As they continued to crawl through the tunnels, the cries for help got a little louder and clearer. They arrived to a small room that they could slightly get off their knees in. The ceiling was just high enough to half stand, half crouch. There was a small table with a lantern on it that was still lit. There were also two broken chairs and a locked safe box with some metallic objects that would rustle around inside the box when shaken. Aside from that, this small room was empty. However, the tunnel continued past this room. So they continued deeper into the tunnel, but the screams for help had stopped at this point.
Hold on, so there's someone like legitimately screaming or calling for help within the tunnel itself? I'm sure the tunnel doesn't look like exactly what we see on the screen, but what? Let's check this out. Any more plans to do ASAP? Yeah, we have ASAP. I think tomorrow morning. I think we're actually waiting for that song to clear. For some reason, like for the last couple of days, ASAP specifically has been getting like blocked on my channel for some reason. But yeah, as soon as that gets cleared, we'll go ahead and release it out to you guys. Let's go.
So they continued deeper into the tunnel, but the screams for help had stopped at this point. My dad described this horrible, familiar stench of death that soon became overwhelming in the tunnels.
A horrible,
they entered one final room with no
death.
further tunnels. My dad still refuses to describe everything that was in this room in detail, other than there were multiple bodies, and they weren't killed by just bullets. They looked as though they'd been mutilated by some kind of creature. One of the bodies was that of a woman. The scene was so horrible that my dad and the two other tunnel rats had to turn around and flee. They had no explanation for what could have done what was seen in that room. On their crawl back out of the tunnels, they started hearing the cries for help from that woman's voice again.
But the woman doesn't exist any longer. She's been extinguished.
My dad says he and his comrades froze and looked at each other with wide eyes and obvious fear in their faces. They had made it to the end of that tunnel. There were no living things from there to the end of it, yet those screams for help were coming from the direction that they just were. They picked up their pace even more. My dad was in the back of the group of three, and he says he would look back every 10 seconds, thinking he was hearing sounds from behind him, fearing he would see someone or something approaching from the darkness. They made it back to the surface eventually, and marked the entrance with a flag that signified to his team that the tunnel had been searched and cleared. Most tunnels would be interconnecting as a means of underground transportation and cover, but my dad says this tunnel was unusual to abruptly end. He says it was easily the most gut-wrenching, horrific, nightmare-inducing thing he'd experienced in his entire 2 years in Vietnam.
Yeah, no. Absolutely not, sir. Not happening. First of all, did they dig the tunnels, or were the tunnels already there? That's what I'm still kind of confused by slightly with the story itself. I think there were a couple of holes in the story, maybe. But, alright, solid. Yeah, it just wouldn't be me, though, but go ahead. You said lost souls who do not know they are dead. Ooh, intriguing.
My basic training for the Air Force was at Lackland Air Force Base.
Lackland. I think I've heard of this before. Or at least the base
My
itself.
basic training for the Air Force was at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. After that, I was sent to Shepherd Air Force Base for technical school, and after my graduation, I received orders to McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey. There, my job was aerospace mechanic at first. I started on the night duty, unfortunately, so my sleep schedule was basically non-existent. My duties basically were lugging plane parts like anti-ice valves, igniters, ignition exciters, sensors, and more from the warehouse to the flight line. It was for the most part boring, repetitive work, especially at night. A lot of sitting around and playing games on my phone, but nobody heard that from me. It had to be like 4 a.m. at this point. I was waiting for the other guy to come drop off some parts to the flight line. He'll be referred to as Mark for the purpose of this story.
The tunnels were there. They had to make sure the enemy wasn't using them.
I was waiting by the back cargo area of the plane we were working on at the time, sitting on a box scrolling through my phone. Mark was taking an incredibly long time with his delivery, so I shot him a few texts. When they went unresponded to, I tried calling him a few times. The calls rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. I figured he was either screening his calls, lost his phone, or was just very busy at the moment. I waited and waited, and he never showed up. Eventually I got a call from Mark's number, so I picked up, but it wasn't Mark's voice on the other end. It was some random guy. He sounded like a grown man in his 40s. He said he saw I tried calling a few times and said he found this phone on the ground outside of the base. I described what Mark looked like and asked him if he had seen anyone who may have resembled him. He said he had not. It's not like he would have been allowed on the base, so my only option was to drive out there and meet him. I asked him where he was, and he gave me the name of a nearby joint where I agreed to meet him. I walked to my car, which was parked in the closest parking lot, and I drove off the base towards the place he told me to meet him. While I was mid-drive, I remembered Mark was sharing his location with me. Long story, but we basically met these 2 girls this one night while off base who we separated from each other with. We, as a joke, started sharing our locations with each other in case we got quote-unquote murdered, as we kept joking.
Oh.
We joked about it mainly because we met them at a sketchy dive bar.
Murdered.
I'm not about to get into that. The place the man on the phone told me to meet him was called Tara's Tavern in Cookstown, the closest town to the base.
Alright.
I pulled up the location of Mark's phone and it checked out. It showed Mark's phone location right next to Tara's Tavern. This begged the question, what was that man doing there this late? At this hour the place wasn't open and there were 0 cars on the road. I pulled into the little parking lot and parked. I stepped out and called Mark's phone again. The guy picked up, and he spoke in a noticeably lower voice now. I told him I was in the parking lot of the pub, and he said he was as well. He said in almost a whisper, "I'll be right over," and he hung up. It was weirder in the moment than it sounds explaining it. I looked at the location on my phone to see if it was updating, but it seemed the location of Mark's phone was in this small patch of woods about 200 feet long and 200 feet wide. I tried calling again and it went straight to voicemail. I looked around the whole parking lot but didn't see anyone. I was all alone. Not even an occasional passing car. I looked to the woods when I heard something over the sound of the crickets, like someone's footsteps. And then I saw a man. It was him. He was standing just behind the tree line between the woods and the parking lot. He called to me, "Are you alone?" And the sight of him, only his upper body visible, it was freaky as hell.
Okay.
I called back,
why?
"No, why?" as I inched my way closer to my car. This was one giant red flag. He called back, "Who are you with?" I didn't answer that. I got in my car and drove back to base. I called my supervisor and told him Mark was missing and someone was hiding in a patch of woods with his phone. My supervisor told me he was with Mark at that moment. He told me to meet them at the small building by the flight line. I met with the two and told them once again what I witnessed when tracking his phone. Mark told me what happened. While off the base, he was approached by somebody outside of a 24/7 convenience store, asking for a ride back to the base. Mark believed that he was actually in the Air Force at first and let him in the car. But as they were driving, the man asked Mark to pull over by the woods so he could pee real quick. Mark obliged for some reason. As Mark was pulled to the side of the road by the same small...
I mean, listen, if someone had to, like, legitimately urinate, and we're in a car together, bro, and I would literally just pull over to the side. So it's not like oh, he stopped for some reason. Nah, bro. If I'm giving you a ride, I would rather you not urinate, in the car. But yeah, but I get it though. Huge red flag though. I agree. Let's go.
Mark obliged for some reason. As Mark was pulled to the side of the road by the same small patch of woods by Tara's Tavern, he wasn't paying attention for a minute, and his door was opened by the man. Without a second to even react, the man was grabbing Mark's arms and squeezing them as he tried to pull him out of the car. Mark said he kicked at the man's groin area until he let go. He dropped his phone and it fell out of the car during the struggle, but as he was free, he drove the car away with the door still open at first. And next thing that happened was he went back to the base to talk with our supervisor. We of course called the police and all went to Tara's Tavern to check if the man was still there. The location of Mark's phone was no longer popping up on the map. It's possible the man destroyed the phone. All we did was file a police report. Some people out there are actually crazy and dangerous. Who knows what he would have done to either of us if he had gotten us in the woods.
See? These are these hitchhike stories, bro. I will never do it. I apologize, right? If you see me driving, right? If you see me driving down the road and I see you with your thumb out, I'm not stopping for you. You could call me all types of a-holes and terrible persons and such as this, right? But like, I will not stop for you. I don't care about your story. I don't care about it. I apologize. This story is helping me, like, legitimately. Again. Make it so I just, now even more, do not care, right, about your stories. Right? Let's go.
During my days as a Marine, I had many different jobs on site, but my least favorite was graveyard patrol. At one point, I was one of the few with the overnight graveyard patrol shift for a nearby memorial cemetery.
Ah, the honor guards of sorts.
As you would imagine, it was a pretty slow shift with not much going on. Oddly enough, even though the cemetery was in a remote location surrounded by dense forest on each side, and I was working the literal graveyard shift, I found the job more relaxing.
The literal graveyard shift.
Than scary or unnerving. I would be the only one in the cemetery, and my relief would come around 4 a.m., which would be the end of my shift. So this had to have happened past 3 a.m., nearing the end of my shift. It was on this otherwise regular night that I was patrolling near the perimeter fence where some of the older headstones were. I wasn't allowed to be on my phone. If I were to be caught with my phone, I would be reprimanded. Even though it was unlikely to be caught since there was no one else really around except for me, I tried my best to follow that rule. So it was just a lot of walking around and looking at old headstones. But anyway, while patrolling past some of the older ones, I began to hear a woman's humming. It was this very calming, soothing kind of humming. Only I wasn't calmed or soothed, because nobody was supposed to be in the...
Nope, I'm leaving. No, not at all, sir. I am doing the honorable thing and being in a sense an honor guard, and I can't have my phone, so only the elements are my friends for the night. I go walking around and all of a sudden I hear someone humming. I quit immediately. Okay, sorry. Maybe there's no honor in me, but I just will not sit here and allow myself to be haunted.
Cemetery, so it was more so a cause for concern. I started following the sounds of the humming. It was coming from behind this intentionally planted line of thick trees with vines and brushes sprouting from the
intentionally planted line of thick trees.
The sides of them. Instead of walking around the long wall of trees, I squeezed through the vines and bushes to the other side, cutting myself in the process. As I struggled to make it to the other side, the humming suddenly stopped as quickly as it started.
Oh.
I was left alone to the silence once again, not even the sound of a cricket. I walked closer to the edge of the memorial property, by the woods, near a few of the big mausoleum-looking structures, and I could distinctly hear some kind of buzzing sound coming from one of them. I stepped up the 3 white steps into the structure. The little door didn't have any kind of locks on it.
So if it sounds like a person humming, then it is a person humming. Logic. I appreciate you, sir.
I'd never been in any of these structures until this point, and I was incorrect in my assumption that they were mausoleums. I still don't know what the purpose of them were. Maybe some kind of memorial building for deceased veterans in the cemetery. As I was inside that cold, dark structure, I could actually feel the hairs on my arms begin to stand up as I got goosebumps for reasons I wasn't sure of just yet.
Okay.
That buzzing sound was coming from inside of the structure, but it almost seemed like it was coming from beneath my feet. I looked down to the wood floor, and there were tiny round holes in each plank of wood, it seemed. Big enough to look through, but way too dark down there to see what lay below the floorboards.
Like perhaps someone sleeping inside of this structure?
I had an idea. I positioned my phone on the floorboard just right so that the flashlight would shoot light into the hole in the wood, and I would look through one of the other holes. I lay basically flat on the floor with my head pressed up to the wood, one eye closed. I expected to see nothing at all, but I saw what appeared to be the top of a woman's head. And as if she knew I started looking immediately, she looked up at me through the hole. I only saw her face for maybe half a second before I fell backwards and let out a blood-curdling scream. I sprinted back to the parking lot and called the guy who was supposed to relieve me soon, and I told him to meet me now. When he showed up, I tried to convince him that I was telling the truth about what I'd seen in that little building. He entertained me by coming with me to it, and I repeated what I did earlier with my phone flashlight. He looked through multiple holes but saw nothing. I had to check for myself, and he was right. It was just some small, empty-looking space underneath the structure. I spent the rest of the shift with him. I left at 4 on the dot. I know he didn't believe me. I wouldn't have believed me either. I'm sure it's a possibility that it was a hallucination as a result of my lack of sleep.
Potentially,
I also
sir.
believe it's a possibility that I witnessed a spirit or something completely supernatural. I'd heard so many older Marines and veterans tell of supernatural experiences they had while serving. I don't know who the woman that I saw could have been if it truly wasn't my imagination, but it chills me to the bone to imagine it having been one of the women buried in the cemetery.
Tantalizing. I think just in terms of just like straight stories, right? I think the second one was the best one, without a doubt, bros. Without a doubt, the second one was the best one. Let's go to another one. 5 disturbing. Let's just stay in the line of the theme here. All right. Police horror stories, dudes. Yes? Okay. Let's go. Some things are not meant for all eyes. I think all ghosts are in the Americas. All right. Hey guys, if you're just coming in, if you guys can hit the like button, that helps a whole lot, dudes.
My partner and I got a breaking and entering call late one Friday night. I'd never responded to a call like that before, but it sounded serious. A young woman was home alone and heard footsteps downstairs, but when she was on the 911 call, the call was cut before she could give her location in the house. We arrived to the home and entered through the front door, which was left unlocked, which later proved to be how the break-in occurred. Both of us shouted police with our guns drawn, expecting the suspect to
Abdilaha. Hi. I apologize for the massively crazy pronunciation, dude. But I definitely appreciate the donation, dude.
to be armed. We called out for Anna. That was the homeowner's name. Anna never called back to us. We knew she must have been scared and didn't want to give away her position to the intruder. We checked the whole first floor, which was small and quick. There didn't appear to be a basement. A door shutting upstairs drew my partner and I's attention.
Okay.
I led the way upstairs. All the doors had been shut, so I couldn't really tell which door I had just heard. I told my partner to check that one while I checked this one. I turned the doorknob and kicked the door open, immediately lifting my gun into the air.
Okay.
It was a dark, empty room. I heard breathing in this room, though. It sounded like a woman's breathing. I looked at the closet door, which was slid slightly open, and I saw half a face, mostly someone's eye, peeking through the opening.
Mostly someone's
Resting
eye.
assured it was Anna, I I lowered my gun and said, "Anna, it's okay. You can come out."
Yeah, it's okay.
She
Come
did,
on.
and the breathing quieted. Then my partner in the next room over called, "Jason, I found her." My feeling in that room suddenly went from at ease to ready to throw up. I raised my gun again and yelled, "Come out of the closet." They did not obey, so I called my partner into the room. He turned on the light, and we opened the closet together to see this disheveled, drugged-out woman holding one of Anna's kitchen knives. With 2 guns pointed at her, she dropped the knife and we brought her into the precinct. Thank God I was stationed in a safer area of town the next year, and I haven't gotten any breaking and entering calls since then.
Wow. Yeah.
As a state trooper for 15 years, I've experienced my share of close calls and uncomfortable situations. This happened over a decade ago when I was still relatively new to the job. I was on night patrol on an interstate about 2:30 a.m.
Okay.
I usually had my car parked near a bush to hide myself from view from oncoming speeding cars. But at this hour, I didn't really try to hide too much. I was moving my car and pulled into a gas station that sat on the side of the interstate. It was closed, not because it was late, but rather it was temporarily out of service. I noticed 2 cars parked in the lot next to each other. There was nothing immediately suspicious about this, but I kept my eye out just because strange things happen at this hour.
Generally.
I parked my car in a way that I could watch the interstate as well as these 2 parked cars. I realized that I didn't see anyone in either of those cars, though. Now this was quite suspicious. The station was closed and there were no workers here. I exited my car with my hands on my belt and approached the 2 cars. I tapped on the windows for the both of them. Nobody in either of them, as I suspected. I began to walk around the lot as the occasional cars zipped down the interstate. I went up to the glass of the closed gas station and knocked on it. I turned around, dumbfounded. Whose cars were these? Just as I imagined they could be in the woods somewhere, I heard someone running from around the building and asked for my help. He was some young 20-something-year-old man, like me at the time. He said his car wouldn't start and needed help. Now, I told him right away that I was no mechanic and that he'd need to call a towing company, but he practically begged me to just check under the hood for a second.
Nope.
He ran to his driver's side and popped the hood.
I don't
I
trust
looked under
it.
the hood with him, not really knowing what to look for because I wasn't much of a car guy at the time. I asked if his battery died, and when I looked at him, I took note that he was looking around very oddly.
Yeah, no.
He replied, "I don't think so." I then looked at the car parked next to him. "Whose car is that?" I asked him. He said he didn't know. He simply parked there to see if there was a porta potty in the back or something.
What?
I was reading through this kid's bullshit. Something was up here. As I looked back at the guy from the 2 cars, I saw him looking back at something or someone. I turned and saw another guy approaching me with a knife in his hand. I unholstered my gun and aimed it at him. He dropped the knife and put his hands up. They both did. I immediately called for backup while keeping the 2 at gunpoint. I cuffed the one who was holding the knife and placed him in the back of my car, and then grabbed the second pair from my glove box and cuffed the second guy. When backup arrived, I went to the back of the gas station where the first guy had originally approached me from.
There's about to be some craziness in the back, bro.
What I found there still holds up to be the most disturbing thing I'd ever seen in all of my years as a trooper.
Right?
There were 2 fresh, dead bodies wrapped in garbage bags, cut up in 2 pieces each to fit in the bags. Along with them was also a shovel sitting on the concrete by the woods. The 2 were planning on burying the bodies somewhere in the woods off the interstate, and it seemed they were in a hurry. These 2 were a couple of the dumbest people I had ever interacted with.
These 2 were the dumbest people that I've ever interacted with. Whoa.
Being that out of anywhere in the state, they chose to bury 2 bodies off an interstate behind a gas station. Going to sleep at night knowing you almost had your throat slit by somebody on the job messes with you, and I didn't get much sleep for a while.
Nope. Absolutely not, sir.
I'm a rookie cop currently working the night shift.
Okay.
I'm just a normal patrol officer conducting traffic stops and responding to basic 911 calls.
Noted.
2 nights in a row last week, I was called to the same house. Dispatch had called me to check out the house as someone had dialed 911 and hung up. The house was a couple miles from me, in my patrol zone. I arrived to the house quickly and turned up the dirt driveway through the trees onto the property. The house was dark, no lights on, no cars, nothing. I parked my squad car on the far right side of the property and went to the front door, taking note that all the windows were properly shut. I knocked on the door and no answer. The door was also locked. For my immediate guess, the place was abandoned, for years by the looks of it. I called to dispatch that the place was abandoned and nobody was there. Then I left. The next night I was working the same shift, and around a similar time, I got a call from dispatch that there was another 911 call from the same house. Only this time, someone could be heard crying on the other end before the call ended. I was asked to check out the house again. This time I was a little further away, but still the drive wasn't too bad. I pulled up the dirt driveway again onto the property, and again, no lights, no cars. I approached the front door again, and this time it was left cracked open. I knocked on the door while holding the doorknob to prevent the door from pushing open. No answer. I called to dispatch that I would be entering the house, which I was cleared to do since the crying over the line implied an urgent situation inside the house. I drew my gun and entered the house. I tried to find a light switch without luck. I had my gun in one hand and now my flashlight in the other. The house was mostly silent, besides the sound coming from behind a closed door. It was the basement door. I called to dispatch for backup in a whisper. The sound coming from down in that basement was a tone, like a dial tone of a phone. I started walking down the stairs as quietly as possible. I got to the bottom and followed the noise of the dial tone to an old, early 2000s style landline speakerphone. The phone was off the hook, and it was playing the dial tone on speakerphone. I put the phone on the hook to silence the noise. It was almost as if it were planned to happen like this. As soon as the phone hit the hook, I heard a muzzled laughing type noise in a far corner of the basement. I turned around, and there was some guy standing opposite me in the basement, with his hand over his mouth, and he appeared to be laughing. But it wasn't this genuine laugh, it was more like a sickly, mentally unstable laugh. The guy was holding something in his other hand. I couldn't see what it was at first, but when he raised his hand up to his head, I realized he was holding a revolver. I aimed my gun at him and yelled to drop the weapon. He paused as he had his revolver to his head, apparently about to pull the trigger. So I shot him in the arm twice, causing him to drop the gun. He screamed in pain as I cuffed him and brought him upstairs. I requested a medical team at once. A second squad car pulled up, as did an ambulance a few minutes later. The scariest part about this for me was not that I had to shoot a man in the arm twice, but that I was mere seconds away from seeing a man spray his brains out onto the wall.
Okay, that was just uncomfortable. There's no commentary needed, I don't think, on this one specifically. It's just the most uncomfortable story I probably ever heard or encountered in my life. He goes to an abandoned house and then, no, there's nothing here, right? And so somehow that the phone is still on, like enough to call, and they're just hanging out in a basement, and oh man, like, no, yeah, you're right, dudes. No basements, bro. No basements. Never basements, bro. The basements of an abandoned house?
My partner and I got a radio call, a welfare check, which is just a check on the welfare of a person. A woman's ex-boyfriend called because he received text from his ex stating that she wished it had never ended and that she could no longer go on without him. We get to the place, knock, pound, etc. No answer. We call the number the ex provided and get an answer and a hang-up. So we hear it from the outside window and know she's in there. We say we're going to break the door down if she doesn't answer. We hear some slurred mess of speech. Door unlocks but doesn't open. We open the door to find a young woman, wet, naked, pale as hell, and swaying in one spot. Her hands bleeding. We call a rescue ambulance and she's off to the hospital. Now to the creepy part.
Okay.
None of the lights would turn on, so we conduct a safety search and find candles lit in the bedroom and bathroom. On the walls were Bible scriptures written in her blood and a tub of brown water, the water being mixed with old blood. I don't know how she survived because that water was dark. She had been sitting in it for approximately 3 to 4 hours.
Okay. Weird, but not
Before
too
getting
heavy.
transferred to a different county, I used to work as a police officer in Burlington, New Jersey.
Okay.
Burlington is not a safe place. They say that crime there is 88% higher than the rest of Jersey. And having worked
88% higher than the rest of Jersey?
there for a year, I got to learn that firsthand. Now, there would be a lot of break-ins, robberies, assaults, and after a while you'd get used to those calls. Sometimes you'd get pretty strange, unsettling calls, though. This was one of them. Most Burlington locals are familiar with the McNeil Mansion,
Okay.
a long abandoned mansion that sits right on the Delaware River. The home was constructed in 1894 to serve as a residence for Andrew H. McNeil, as well as his wife and 4 daughters. The house had been abandoned and left to decay since 1974 and is now owned by the county. Sometimes there would be kids trespassing on the property to check it out. Sometime past midnight, I was told over the radio by dispatch to investigate the property, as there was a report by a neighboring house that there were some people seen hopping the fence to the property. Upon entering the property, I noticed a light coming from inside one of the upstairs windows. Part of me inside died a little as I realized someone was in there and that it was my job to go in and get them out. I requested backup into my radio and stated I would be entering the mansion to pursue a trespasser. I scanned the outside of the house once more looking for an entry point and found one of the lower windows was smashed open and easily accessible, and that's how I made my way in. Right away, first thing I did was make my presence as a police officer known. I was inside what appeared to once be the living room of the mansion, rubble covering the whole floor. I heard footsteps upstairs. I shouted again, expecting them to come down the stairs. When they didn't, that meant it was my job to come up. I went up the stairway and started walking around. There was no way to hide my steps with all the litter and rubble on the ground.
I bet, bro.
I heard something fall in a nearby room. This is when the worry and fear really started to kick in. At this point, I had my hand on my gun holster, ready to react. Though let me tell you, having a gun doesn't make you feel invincible. I shouted again to try and draw out the trespassers from the room. You ever hear that dumb, overused quote, "I didn't sign up for this" in the movies?
Exactly.
Well, I was pretty much feeling that exact way. I stepped into the room that I thought was where the noise had echoed from. It was some small, weird room with a bunch of windows with blurred glass film. There was a sliding closet door open about 3/4, so they had to be in there. I took out my pepper spray and gave one more warning that I was a police officer before yanking the closet open fully. It was empty. This made no sense.
Yeah, this is
I looked
definitely
around the
another
room and the windows.
no situation,
I looked to
bro.
an outside deck, and there was someone standing behind one of them. I couldn't see anything about their features other than the outline of their body. But then I realized there were people at the other windows too.
People.
The way they were all looking at me through the window film. Such a ghostly appearance they gave. Like a picture from a kid's horror novel. I found the door to that deck in an adjacent room. When I stepped out, the 3 figures standing at the windows were gone. I didn't see any other way off the deck besides the door I came out through. I saw the flashing lights of a police car through a bunch of trees, parked on the same lot as me. Another officer announced his and his partner's arrival to me over the radio.
No, thank you.
I met the officers outside the house and pointed up at the deck where I saw 3 people standing.
Absolutely
They were
not.
creeped out as well when I described how they all just stood there at their own windows looking in. We searched the whole mansion together. I eventually came to a small room with a window on the first floor. And once again, something was outside this window. I had to step closer to figure out if it was a person's head or not. When I got too close, the object lowered below the window. I radioed the other officers to go outside with me. We looked around the whole property and didn't find anyone. We searched for another 10-15 minutes before closing up all the entrances to the house and moving on. The scariest part of this for me was definitely seeing 3 ghost-like silhouettes all standing at their own of the 3 windows to that deck, looking inside at me.
Okay. Yeah, this last one was rough for me, bro. Yeah, wouldn't be me. Honestly, respect guys, but Bro, this job sounds horrifying. Okay, it just sounds horrifying. All right. What is this next one here? Hold on. 3 true lockdown stories. Dude, hell no. Never.
Attention, lockdown, lockdown. Lock the doors. Stay away from the windows.
Back in 2016, my school went into a lockdown. I was in my senior year, and it was the last week of school, so everything was kind of chill and laid back at that point. My friend, who we all used to call Moose, was cutting class with me to smoke in my car in the senior parking lot.
Okay, Moose.
One of our friends, Mario, who was in the lunchroom, texted me to come chill with him, so Moose and I started walking back to the school. As we were about to enter through one of the discreet back doors of the school by the band and chorus rooms, Mario texted me saying the school was going into lockdown, and he was right. As we entered through
yeah, I think we saw Nuke's top 5 last Wednesday.
the still unlocked back door, we noticed the red lockdown lights flashing in the tiny band hallway. We walked through the empty hall. This was the quieter section of the school with less foot traffic since we were far from the regular classrooms. I was texting Mario asking him what was going on and if it was just a drill. Moose and I stood in the hallway waiting for an answer. My friend Mario texted back saying, "Dude, holy shit," and the 3 dots bubble, meaning he was typing, sat under his text for like 30 seconds.
Right.
Then it went away. He didn't send a second text. I sent him 3 question marks.
See, a lot of people kind of do that, right? Like, if I'm texting someone and they're just like, the dots that pop up saying, yeah, they're typing something, and then they just basically delete it. I mean, that's kind of normal, though, so I don't know. Let's go.
Went away. He didn't send a second text. I sent him 3 question marks. Moose and I didn't really know what to do. The main hallway lights were shut off, and all that lit up the halls were the backup lights and the red flashing lockdown lights. There were no teachers anywhere to tell us what to do,
Okay.
so we just chilled in the hallway.
Where were the
We
teachers?
tried opening the doors to the auditorium, but they had already been locked. Moose then tapped my shoulder and pointed down the hallway. All the way down, there was someone dressed in black fast approaching, like speed walking down the hall in our direction. At first it looked like a teacher, but as he got closer, we realized he was wearing some kind of white mask. Moose and I started walking backwards instinctively in response to what we now perceived to be a threat.
Exactly.
As he got even closer,
Bro,
we
get
could
out of there.
confirm it was a mask on his face. And it was this horrifying, disgusting mask of some pale, rotting-like face. I'd never seen anything so creepy at any Halloween stores or anything. The man was now too close for comfort. And
Right.
the way he was approaching us was obviously full of aggression.
Right.
Moose and I turned and started running back towards the band room. We hoped the band teacher, Miss Bryant, would be in there to let us in.
She's not going to be in there, bro.
We got to the door, which was locked, and started pounding on it. But we didn't have time to wait.
Bro, those are some dirty
Moose
chairs.
and I split up to hide. I hid in one of the music department closets. I don't know where Moose went. I turned the light in the closet off and hid behind a big container. There was a big glass window in the door to the closet, and I could see into the hall thanks to the little light from the backup lights.
Oh.
I heard footsteps approaching from outside, so I ducked my head completely behind the container. I only looked up and peeked out the window after the footsteps had stopped for a while, and I assumed it was clear. But it was not.
It was
The
not.
footsteps stopped because the man in the mask was standing at the door, looking in through the glass. I ducked back down, hoping he didn't see me.
Oh, he saw
Then
you,
the closet door creaked open.
bro. Yeah, he saw you.
It sounded as though he was trying to fiddle for the light switch, couldn't find it, then gave up. I heard footsteps quickly walk away, matching his speed walking pace from just before. I took out my phone to text Moose to see if he was alright, and I saw I had a long text from Mario. He explained that a student was stabbed in the bathroom by some masked man with a blade.
Oh.
Moose also texted me saying he's alright. He ran back outside to his car. I realized that was a good idea.
Yeah, now you're left in
I
there
made sure
alone.
the coast was clear and booked it for my car as well.
Okay.
I sat in my car in front of the school and watched as cop cars swarmed the place.
Leave?
At least 10 officers entered the building.
Moose came to sit in my car with me, and we watched for over half an hour. The school was let out early, with police escorting the kids out.
The school was let out early. What did you think was going to happen, sir? The school was going to be let out early. It was mandatory. Now it was definitely mandatory.
Of course. They never even found the masked man in the school. He likely escaped through one of the back doors. There were helicopters searching all day for the man. I'm pretty sure he was never found. I thank my lucky stars I didn't have a similar fate as that kid in the bathroom.
Alright. Creepy. Ish.
I went to a very poor high school in a bad neighborhood. Because of that, we regularly had fire drills and lockdown drills in the case of something happening.
Okay.
During a lockdown, the teacher would turn off the lights and we'd all hide in a corner of the classroom without saying anything. It was a cold day in the third quarter of the school year. The windows were all shut, obviously, but still, my teacher had to stop mid-sentence because we could all hear some kind of shouting outside. Definitely some kind of commotion. My teacher went to the window, looked outside, then opened one of the windows, but the yelling seemed to stop by the time he did. At the same time, the dean started speaking over the loudspeaker and said we were going into a lockdown. My teacher rushed to shut the door and turn off the lights, and we all did our thing, went to the corner of the room. Time seemed to move slow as we were all huddled in that corner. Screams started coming from the hallway. Not the screams of students, but deranged, angry screams from a grown man. Familiar to the screaming we briefly heard from outside. Someone dangerous was in the building, clearly. The school I went to didn't have security guards. It was too poor. So literally, in a case like this, we'd have to wait for police to arrive. The screams were then accompanied by bangs on a nearby door. Another classroom. We could hear the screams of the kids in the room next to us. The banging stopped. The screaming grew closer, until it was right outside our door, and then bangs on our classroom door. A couple kids screamed and started to cry. The sick man on the other side of the door banged and banged. He started hitting the glass with his elbow, I think, as he screamed insane things that made no sense to us.
Right.
Some of it being, "I'm sick of it," and "just stop already." The sickening sound of the small, thin glass window of the door shattering made the reality of the situation sink in even worse. Of course, kids on either side of me were screaming and crying now. Me, I was just sitting there in total shock. The man on the other side of the door stuck his arm into the room through the thin window opening and tried unlocking the door. My teacher took that opportunity to grab a pair of scissors and literally stab the man's arm. The man cried out in pain, banged on the door a few more times, even harder now.
The teacher stabbed him in the arm? I mean,
and started running down the halls.
Sounds like
still
he needed
crying
it.
in what was probably a mix of pain
Obviously, that day was a good day for a stabbing.
and anger. The lockdown was ended a few minutes after police arrived. There had to be at least 6 cop cars outside.
Right.
And yes, the crazy sicko man was arrested and probably brought to a mental hospital. The man apparently wasn't armed, but he clearly came into the school with intentions of hurting people.
Right.
Kids, mind you.
Hurting children.
I went to a school in California.
Okay.
We always had a lockdown drill once a month, but only one time ever was it not a drill.
Like, is this like new or something? Because like I don't think when I was growing up, right, like we had like school lockdowns. I don't recall that, right? I could be wrong, but like I think at most we had like maybe like fire drills and things like that, but I don't think that they specifically like locked down the school for like honestly any reason. I don't know. Let's go. Different
It was in the
times,
cafeteria
different
during my
times.
lunch period when the teacher, who was in charge of watching the lunchroom, announced over the microphone for everyone to be quiet. He announced to us,
Yeah, Derek, happy birthday, dude. All right, dude. But not right now because today we're doing non-music reactions, dudes. But we'll add it to the list though.
that the school was going into lockdown and ordered us to be quiet. I think he genuinely scared everyone by how serious and nervous he sounded, because everyone in the cafeteria looked genuinely shook and actually shut up. I looked around the disturbingly quiet cafeteria and could see everyone else was doing the same thing, taking nervous, curious glances at their friends and strangers at other tables. Then shit went down. A gunshot echoed from across the school, and that's when panic set in with everyone. Some kids ran for the exit door. The teacher in charge of the cafeteria yelled at everyone to hide under the tables as he locked the cafeteria doors and shut off the lights. I was sitting under the table with my friends, heart racing, feeling sick, knowing my life could be in danger. Every minute felt like an eternity, just waiting for someone on the intercom to say it's all clear. Then across...
Hey, Critex, I appreciate the donation. I don't think these stories are lies, bro. I don't think so. At all. They seem realistic, at least, right? For me, at least.
Just waiting for someone on the intercom to say it's all clear. Then, across the cafeteria, there was a sudden outroar of screams from students, mostly girls, and the sound of tables and chairs being moved or falling over. My friends and I looked out from under the table, and we saw a kid with a gun outside the locked door of the cafeteria. Then I remember hearing gunshots. He was shooting at the glass door. The glass didn't shatter right away. I don't even know if it did at all, but the entire lunchroom cleared out through the two side exit doors to the outside. Students of all ages either ran to their cars or off the school property and into the neighborhood streets. I ran in the direction of the front of the school, also the direction of my house. I saw police cars already outside. I think they had just arrived at that point, but I didn't stick around to watch. I got home and told my parents, and my dad turned on the news to see the shooting was already being talked about. Miraculously, only one girl was wounded, and the police somehow apprehended him without killing him. I'm sorry for anyone else who has to go through something like this. Fearing for your life that much is not something anyone should have to.
Yeah, that's absolutely terrifying, bros. Because like I think us as parents, like we don't want to, send our children to schools and have this, be a like literal experience for them, dudes. Like, it would be nice if they had the same experience we as parents had, going to school. Cause, bro, let's do one more. Let's do one more, guys. Sleepover horror stories. Interesting. Blizzard horror stories or unknown creature horror stories. Let's check out the true unknown. All right, unknown creature horror stories. Dude. All right. Let's get it.
So this happened on a camping trip with my girlfriend Alicia, my best friend Rodney, and his girlfriend Amanda. My dad told me about a perfect place to go camping right by a big lake surrounded by dense forest.
Okay.
A trail from a nearby parking lot would lead straight to the lake. His directions were straightforward, and it was actually easy to get to the lake. We got there as the sun was on its way down and the sky was turning that beautiful orange. The lake was calming, and the sound of the breeze hitting the leaves was peaceful. We had our tent set up, and there was still a hint of orange in the sky, though it was very dark in the woods by now. There was a slight orange reflection on the calm lake. It was very warm out, and Amanda suggested we all jump in the water. I was kind of up for it, as my dad said it would be perfect to jump in. For that reason, we all brought towels. The girls seemed more eager than Rodney and I, though. The two got into their underwear and walked into the lake, exclaiming it was actually warm. I told them I'd go in after setting up the campfire at least, since we had already gathered some wood. Starting the fire proved to be especially difficult for me, because I just couldn't get the wood to catch. I'm not exactly a Boy Scout. Rodney took over, as I watched him try to start the fire. one of the girls started screaming and flailing around in the lake. Amanda looked just as confused as Rodney and I. Then Alicia went underwater for a few seconds, and Amanda started to scream she's drowning. I took off my shirt and ran as fast as I could into the water.
Okay.
But when I got to where she was, the water was only up to maybe my waist. I saw her arms still flailing out above the water and splashing about, and I pulled her up above the water. I yelled, "What the hell happened?" She didn't answer right away and ran straight for the campsite, seemingly out of breath. Halfway there, she turned and yelled, "Get out of the water." Amanda and I looked at each other and listened. As I began moving out of the lake,
What's in the water?
I felt something strong grab around my ankle and try pulling me down. There was a sharp, piercing feeling cutting into my ankle as well. I yelled in a panic and kicked whatever it was with my free leg until I was able to break free. We made it back to the campsite, and Alicia was already sitting down on a cooler, putting pressure on an apparent wound on her ankle. I sat down on another cooler and checked my ankle, and there was a deep but small gash on the right side of my ankle which was pouring out blood. I told Rodney to get us both some band-aids for my first aid kit in the tent. After patching up the wounds, we felt more relaxed and at ease. We just wanted to figure out what the hell that was that grabbed us.
What was
I
it?
said it might have been an eel. Rodney questioned if eels even live in lakes like this.
A lake?
Alicia said it didn't feel like an eel or a fish. It felt more like a claw. I got chills as she said it, because I got what she was saying, but how would that make any sense?
It wouldn't.
Regardless, we stuck around because whatever got us was in the water, and we were on land. Nothing could happen now.
Exactly.
At
You're on
this
land.
point, it was dark out.
Exactly. You're on land. I mean, come on. What can happen now? At this point, it was dark now.
The sun was completely gone, and the only light was from the fire. We were a couple beers deep, talking about life, about mutual friends, and occasionally bringing up that thing in the water again. All was well, until a splash came from out in the water. We all looked over our shoulders at the same time out to the pitch-black lake. Probably just a fish, we figured.
Exactly. Probably just a
We
fish.
resumed conversation for a few seconds, but then there was another splash. It didn't sound like a little fish jumping out of the water. It sounded like the kind of splashes you'd hear when a person is walking through waist-deep water. The girls wanted us to go check the lake, so Rodney and I took a couple flashlights and went to the edge of the lake, where we were still hearing noises. With the two lights pointed at the water, we scanned the calm surface of the lake
scuba diving porcupine.
until Rodney stopped me and said, "What is that?" I looked at where his light was pointed.
Okay.
There was this object in the water. Well, at first I thought it was an object, but then I realized it resembled the head of some creature. Definitely not any kind of creature that would live in a lake. It seemed like it was just sticking its head out of the water, and we could see the reflection of its eyes. It was looking at us. Then it moved, as it rised up slightly out of the lake, making another splashing noise. That's when Rodney and I screamed "Go" to the girls. I remember Rodney saying, "Take all your important stuff and go," which was a smart idea. I took all my valuables and left the tent and bigger things. We ran back down the trail to the parking lot, packed the car, and took off down the parkway.
You will never catch me camping, okay? I just wouldn't. Like, I'll camp in my fenced backyard, right? Or I'll camp in like my garage, but I'm not camping outside, bro. Can't do it. It's not in me. I'm not built like that. I don't know what it is, bro. Right? I just can't do it mentally.
The next day, I returned with my dad to collect the tents, but everything that we left in the campsite was destroyed. The tents were shredded, the coolers were scratched and thrown across the site. I told my dad about the creature in the lake. I showed him the gash in my ankle and I asked him what could have done this. He said he had no earthly idea, and we left in a hurry. None of us ever returned to that lake.
Yeah. No. I wouldn't have been there in the first place, bro. I wouldn't have been able to.
My house sits next to a nature preserve on Long Island, New York. I live alone most.
Ooh, Long Island, New York. All right. Welcome home, sir.
My house sits next to a nature preserve on Long Island, New York.
Nature preserve.
I live alone most of the time, besides when my girlfriend who lives out of state comes to visit.
Okay.
Well, I can't say I live completely alone. I have 2 German shepherds, Tate and Moose.
Tate
They
and
sleep
Moose.
downstairs by the back door.
Oh, so this is the second moose that will be making an appearance tonight from him. Right?
House. Last week, for 3 nights in a row, I would wake up to the 2 of them barking in the middle of the night at the back door. The first night, I just peeked from the door window into the yard, which was empty. The second night...
Yeah, bro, he does have this, like, gravelly voice really similar to Corpse, for real.
The first night, I just peeked from the door window into the yard, which was empty. The second night, I actually went outside to the patio to look around, but there wasn't anyone there. On the third night in a row of waking up to barking, I told myself that was it. Someone was creeping around my property every night, causing my dogs to go crazy.
Most likely.
I put Tate on his leash and took him out to the yard. Weirdly, he seemed more calm now that he was outside. He wasn't barking at anything. I walked him around the backyard and by the tree line to the woods for a little bit, trying to help him pick up on whatever the 2 had been barking at the past 3 nights. Then he started. By the tree line, he started tugging on his leash and barking at something in the woods. Obviously, I couldn't see too far into the woods as it was nighttime, so I let him lead the way into the woods. If someone were to be trespassing on my property every night, I figured the best way to scare them off would be having my dog chase after them. Tate kept pulling and barking as we got deeper into the woods. I was starting to lose my breath just trying to keep up with him. He seemed to be really locked into something specific in front of us. But